What's up, everybody? Hector the Pepper here. Welcome back or welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to take a step back in time. And we're going to talk about how the military launched an operation to find a person named Dorothy. Now, a little bit of backstory on Dorothy. She's from Kansas. She got sucked up in a tornado. She skipped along the yellow brick road with a scarecrow, a tin man, and a cowardly lion. Yes, I'm speaking about the movie Wizard of Oz and how a sophisticated military entity was tricked into believing that Dorothy was a real person. So I'm going to take us back to the 80s. Very early 80s, 1980 to be exact. And it starts with this guy. His name's Mel. Now, Mel wants to serve his country. Mel decides that he's going to join the Navy. And upon his enlistment, he's speaking with the powers that be, and he's going through all the questionnaires, background checks, the whole kit and caboodle. At the time, homosexuality within the military was frowned upon. And they had a thing called the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act, which meant that if you were gay, you couldn't tell anybody. And if it was discovered that you were gay, you could be separated, kicked out of the military. No questions asked. Well, Mel tells the people who are recruiting him that he is gay. So he tells them straight up, I'm gay. And those people at the time were like, we don't care. Let's get you in there. You want to serve your country? That's good enough for us. So Mel joins, goes to work, starts doing his thing. About a year later, 1981, he decides he needs a higher security clearance for a position that he's trying to get. Well, when he's going under the security clearance investigation, as everyone has to, where they go through your background check, they talk to friends, family, acquaintances, they want to know where you lived in the last 10 years. A big deal. His sexual orientation comes up. And he tells them once again, he's gay. Now, this should be in his record, I'm sure, somewhere, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe the recruiter failed to put it in there and they just kept it a secret. But regardless, the military was like, wait a minute, you're what? And he's like, Mel's like, I'm gay. And they're like, absolutely not. And proceeded to kick him out. So Mel gets into a legal battle with the Navy. And his pretty much position on the matter is, I came in, I said I was gay. I went for a higher security clearance. Again, restated that I was gay. And then you kicked me out. Make it make sense. So this was like a pretty hot button issue in the 80s. And of course, the media wanted to talk to Mel. And Mel accidentally dry snitches on other gay people. So they're interviewing him, and he proceeds to tell the reporters and the media that, hey, there's a lot of gay people where I'm stationed. And he was stationed in Great Lakes, which is in Chicago at the time. And when high military officials heard his statement, they were like, I'm sorry, what? Absolutely not. So they proceeded to launch this massive investigation, which costs an undisclosed amount of money right off the rip, right? So they started this investigation, and they call upon the NIS, which is the Naval Intelligence Service. All right. Not to be confused with NCIS, the TV show. All right. The NIS then proceeds to take kind of their agents and send them undercover in Chicago to infiltrate the gay scene, and they're told to like gay it up and hang out in all the gay bars and all that stuff. And at the time, it was to kind of find any service members who were affiliated within like the gay community so they could ultimately question them and then proceed to separate them. Well, they don't really find anybody who they can be like, you're in the military and we know it and we're going to kick you out. But what they do find are people are talking about this person named Dorothy. And they kept saying, I'm a friend of Dorothy. I'm going to hang out with Dorothy. Dorothy's great, whatever, everything under the sun. But it all revolved around this person named Dorothy. Now, these NIS agents report that back to their officials. And those people are like, we need to find Dorothy. They were under the belief that they were going to find a person named Dorothy. They were going to find her. And she was going to have this list or book or whatever the case may be, some form of data outlining either A, all of the gay people in Chicago, or B, all the gay people in the world. And they were going to be able to find her and essentially through whatever means acquire this list or book or data and cross-reference the names with all service members and then proceed to kick them out. Now, this really doesn't lead to anything. So put a pin in that. Moving to the right, though, at the same time, other investigations were opened up. Other operations were also being conducted outside of Operation Find Dorothy, right? Operation Friend of Dorothy, right? And unfortunately, these other investigations actually brought some like evidence of homosexuality within like among service members to light. And they ended up kind of finding out, I guess, roughly like 1,900 service members who were gay. And they processed them out of the military. And this is across all branches. This isn't just the Navy, but all branches. Now, the running joke is always that, the Navy is gay, and they're even in the YMCA lineup. You got the Indian, you got the motorcycle guy, you got the construction worker, and you got the Navy guy. It might honestly be from this overall like investigation or operation, because of those like 1,900 individuals who were found to be gay, like 55% of them were in the Navy. So do with that information what you want, but that might be where it derived from, the Navy's gay kind of perspective. Anyways, when these people get discharged, they receive what the service members called a blue discharge. And I'm sure it had an actual fancy name, under some type of, actual administrative number or whatever the case may be. But the service members called it a blue discharge because the discharge was printed on a kind of bluish paper and then they receive it. Now, the unfortunate part about the blue discharge is it wasn't directly like outlined as homosexual discharge. It was outlined to cover pretty much anyone whose like character or traits did not match up with the military's like ideology. So it was kind of like we don't like what you're doing, but we really can't get you in trouble for it, but we don't like it. It doesn't meet our standard. So we're going to separate you. And this particular type of discharge, because it was so broad, really targeted several groups, including gay and lesbian, but also just regular women. And I say regular meaning straight and African Americans. So really disgusting of the time to just separate people who's like, we don't like you, get out. And these people were, 100% willing and ready and were actively serving the country. Now, there was probably upwards of 10,000 people at least, according to a lot of the research that I did, who were separated like from pretty much the 80s on, that were found to be homosexual. So going back to Operation Find Dorothy, right? The people within these like gay bars and stuff like that, like I said, were always like, I'm a friend of Dorothy and stuff like that. Now, this stems back to the 1940s, which these investigators didn't know at the time, and a lot of people didn't know at the time if you weren't a part of the gay community. And it stems from The Wizard of Oz, the movies, or the movie and the book. The Wizard of Oz was, at the time, within the gay community, proclaimed as like a pillar of the gay community. Judy Garland, who played Dorothy, became like a pillar of the gay community. The big reason why they kind of compared the two was because you had three dudes, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, and none of them really like fit the social standard of what their roles should be. They lived outside of that. The Scarecrow couldn't scare anybody. The Tin Man was always lubed up. The Lion wasn't courageous whatsoever, but very like kind of like feminine. And so a lot of people took it as these are, without it being said, are gay characters. Well, around the 1940s, that's when the friend of Dorothy euphemism for gay came about. So what they would do is person A is talking to person B, and person A is like, hey, I'm a friend of Dorothy. They just kind of bring it up in conversation. And what they're saying in a code is, I'm gay. And person B is, if they were gay, they most likely knew what that meant. So they'd be like, I'm also a friend of Dorothy. And that was their way of telling each other very covertly that they're both gay. If person A was talking to person B and they were like, I'm a friend of Dorothy, and person B was like, who's Dorothy? Then person A could easily be like, oh, sorry, I thought you were an acquaintance with Dorothy. My mistake. And they could completely kind of bypass it. And it was their safe way to kind of figure out who was in their community. Because at the time, and I'm not going to say people aren't still bigoted, because they are, but at the time, the people were super bigoted. And if you were discovered to be gay, you potentially could face jail, you could face fines, you could be killed. And in some places, even if it was still legal, and somebody who despised homosexuality, like, they might just bring violence upon you because of your sexual orientation. So the gay community kind of, like I said, they developed this like code phrase to figure out who was gay and who they could be themselves around, which is sad in itself. People should have been able to be who they wanted to be, all the time, whenever. Well, anyways, so these guys, the NIS guys, they thought they were going to find Dorothy. And of course, they didn't, right? That right there alone is a waste of time. They also wasted so much resource and money. So going back to the other people who ran other operations that did discover gay people and separated them, one of the guys that was interviewed was an Air Force captain. Now, this Air Force captain tells the reporter that he's speaking to that the Air Force essentially just wasted $4 to $5 million by separating him. That's how much it cost to train him. That was in 1981. In today's money, that's about $14 to $18 million for one guy. One guy, right? That's $14 to $18 million. It's insane. Just a waste of money. So they're searching. It just is nothing. Nothing is coming up. And they're kind of losing it, right? Well, fast forward to 1990. And there's an admiral, Vice Admiral Joseph S. Donnell. And he's looking over the data. And he's happy that, people are getting separated, whatever the case may be. I'm not saying he was ecstatic, but the rules are, and I say rules because it was a rule, but the rules are being followed, and, but he realizes that it's primarily gay men that are being separated. He's like, what about the lesbians? So he sends out a memo to all of his subordinates or his employees, right? And the memo pretty much says hey, don't just focus so much on gay dudes, focus on lesbians too. Focus on these gay women. How do you even, identify a gay man, but the question kind of was, how do you identify a lesbian, right? Because a gay man, at least at the time, it was oh, he's feminine, oh, he's this, and because there was kind of social check boxes that men would meet, and if you didn't, right, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, Lion, you didn't check those boxes within the what a man should be like, you were classified or marked as gay. So for them, in their mind, it was a little bit easier to identify a gay man, but it was difficult to identify a lesbian, because a lesbian, or a woman especially at the time, was considered, soft and soft-spoken and feminine and things like that. So it's well, how do I identify a lesbian? This is quoted. This is pulled from his memo. And I'm going to read this to you. He wrote, "Experience has shown that the stereotypical female homosexual in the Navy is hardworking, career-oriented, willing to put in long hours on the job, and among the command's top professionals." Now, what does this mean? It means that she works hard. Crazy. It was so inconceivable for these people to believe that a woman could work just as hard, if not harder, than her male counterpart within whatever, job in the military that they had, that if she did, she was gay. And going back, because it was so broad, it was easy to put or to separate these people and give them the blue discharge. It reminds me of the movie G.I. Jane, starring Demi Moore, where she's going through Navy SEAL training and she's actually being pretty successful. Well, they end up trying to stop her from being so successful, and since they couldn't impede her ability to be successful during training, they ended up essentially deploying a spy, if you will, to take photographs of her and stuff like that, which is creepy to begin with. But they ended up photographing her at the beach with another female, and that other female ended up being a lesbian. Demi Moore's character in the movie was not a lesbian, but because she was affiliating herself with a lesbian, if so facto, she was also a lesbian. So they ended up trying to cease her training, and we're going to do an investigation and this and the third. So it really, that's obviously a movie, but it leads you to believe how many people were actually successful, men and women, who weren't gay, but they had a gay homie, and they didn't care that their homie was gay, but because they were found associating with them, you kind of like that guilty by association, like, well, like you're gay because, this guy over here or this girl over here is gay or lesbian, so you are too. And you're like, no, but I'm not. Like, I fuck hella bitches. And they're like, no, you probably like dick in your ass. So it's like, what? So how many people were wrongfully separated? Not to say that separating people because of their sexual orientation isn't wrong, because it is, but how many people at the time were like, hey, I'm not gay, and they're like, we don't believe you, and they just get separated. Now, when you get the blue discharge, they would give you most of the time an other than honorable. So researching it some, you have your honorable discharge, which is what you want. Then you have your dishonorable discharge, which is like what you don't want, right? And then kind of in the middle is like your other than honorable, right? Now, it pretty much, when you receive that, it kind of is like, you didn't really meet our standard, so we separated you. Most likely you didn't finish out the contract that you signed up for, right? But you didn't do so bad where you were like maybe endangered yourself or others, or you did like a criminal act. So therefore you didn't get a dishonorable. So it's kind of in the middle. So it's like, see you later. Like it's almost like you weren't ever there. However, within your record, because whether people want to believe it or not, you do have like a permanent record that kind of follows you around, and a military service can affect that. And it did. It affects your ability to potentially like secure jobs that are maybe associated with the government. If they look at your record and see that you got it other than honorable, they want to know why, which now you have to be like, I was separated because of my sexuality. And now, especially during that time, they're going to be like, see you later. Like, we don't want to hire you, right? Fast forward to 2011. All right, September 20th, 2011 to be exact. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act was repealed by President Obama. Great. What does that mean? It means that service members, men, women, can now openly be gay. They are allowed to, be themselves, love who they want to love without the persecution of being separated, which is phenomenal. Now, the people who especially were still alive and stuff like that, who were maybe separated due to a blue discharge, when it was repealed, most of their records, I'm not going to say all, I'm sure there were some that slipped through the cracks, and I'm sure there was people who had, passed away, and, whatever the case may be. A lot of the records were changed to like an honorable. So it's a little too late, but I guess it's still kind of like a step in the right direction. I'm sure the military is still like moving in a progressive route, but the fact that so much money and resources were wasted way back in the day to find a fictional person with a fictional list to separate people, and what kind of boggles my mind is nobody stopped to just go, who is Dorothy? And I don't mean to themselves. I mean, wouldn't it have been just smart to ask somebody at like the bar, like, hey, who's Dorothy? It could have been real simple. And then it'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, Dorothy, it's like our code. Boom. You just save so much time and effort and money. But then again, I guess it's a plus that these guys were pretty dumb and they didn't do that, because if they would have done that, then it would have given them the ability to take all the people that they were using and put them in another direction. And the 1900 number would have been a lot higher at that time. But I just wanted to share this because it's pretty insane to me that happened. You know what I mean? Like, that so much resource was spent to find gay people. and that the military in general was willing to like waste so much money. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, like, try to upload anywhere from at least once a week, but trying to do 2 videos, and stay safe. Peace.